Welcome to RFA Convention 2025, where we celebrate trucking.
Good morning, everybody. I take it all these silver envelopes are for me, Bongani. It says, it's got my name on there, is it? Conference speaker. Well, thank you, everyone, for getting here on time. This address would have been done by our chairman of the board, Penwell Lunga, but unfortunately, he's had a sudden passing away, death in the family. His brother-in-law passed away. And I said to him, stay with your wife. She needs the support. So I will do this address on his behalf. But he sends the regards. He was virtually at our board meeting yesterday. And he wishes you all a fantastic conference. And obviously, he now has to focus on some family matters. But let's get on with the RFA. Just going to make sure I've got it. So you've seen a bit in the video around the formation of the RFA. The RFA has its beginnings in 1975. That's why we're celebrating 50 today. So the RFA itself is not necessarily 50 years old, but it has inherited from the structures that existed before it. So it's come a reasonably long way. And as you can see on the screen, it had a couple of iterations until what it became today, as you know it, as the RFA. And that first board meeting was held on the 16th of November. And the first gazetting of the Public Haulers Association was in June. So in June, you will see that we are going to launch our commemorative Truck Talk book. So we're keeping that as a surprise for June while people are doing some research. We have, during the course of the convention, some of the original people who started the original PHA, and they will say one or two words at the gala dinner tonight. And if they didn't know that, start preparing for it now. The RFA has done many things, and I'm going to go through this very briefly, and Penwell's address will be on the website, because Bongani took 10 minutes of the 12 minutes I have to do this address. One of the most important things that happened was when I was still on the other side of the fence. As most of you know, I used to be a government employee. I worked at the Department of Transport, was responsible for road operations and enforcement. And one of the things that the RFA did with an individual, led by an individual called Jack Webster, some of you might recall Jack Webster, was to take the then Road Traffic Act and create what today we know as the National Road Traffic Act. And there is a chapter in the National Road Traffic Act that actually comes directly from the Road Freight Association. It's Chapter 6. It's about operator fitness, and it was the early drives by the then Road Freight Association to ensure that there was a level playing field in South Africa. We can discuss that at length. That level playing field hasn't really come to pass. Some parts are in play, but there's still a number of gaps, and those are some of the challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. There were various vehicle dimension changes, and one of the changes that we have today is that we have 22-meter vehicles. And how that got to be 22 meters is an interesting discussion. And I remember being at the department when there was this heavy argument at how you would measure the 22 meters. The department was following the American process, which was you measured the 22 meters from behind the driver's seat to the end of the vehicle. So the 22 meters actually would have ended up being about 25. But the representatives of the RFA said, no, from the front of the vehicle, there where the bumper in the front is, to where the bumper at the back are. And so that's how we got to 22 meters. It was quite interesting how some of these discussions happened. I also remember a discussion around masses, weights, and the bridge formula. And those of you know Jack Webster. Jack Webster was a very direct person. And when the Department of Transport was talking about tolerances, which exist in the Act today, you're given tolerances in terms of the readings of weighbridges. And with all due respect to all the ladies here, Jack Webster used to say, you either is overloaded or you isn't. You are is pregnant or you are not. And thank goodness we didn't get that put into the Act. It doesn't mean the pregnant part. I mean the unloaded or isn't unloaded, so we've got some tolerance. So once again, from the very beginning, the RFA was instrumental in bringing in important parts into the legislation that allowed for sensible application of legislation. And that's a very, very important topic to have, or a very important view to have in terms of a legislator. In the video you saw talk about UJ, talk about trucking development, trucking courses. The RFA was instrumental in bringing into play an organization then known as Trucking Against AIDS. This wasn't hearing aids and walking aids. It was something that really affected our industry, and that grew into what we know today as trucking wellness. So looking after shaping policy, improving standards, and making sure the playing fields were level. There's a brief rundown of what's happened over the last 50 years, and I think the most important thing that's happening now is that the RFA is ensuring that the advent of AI, you all know what AI is. As you know, in South Africa, we normally couple words together. So our soccer team's not called Bafana. It's called Bafana Bafana. So AI in South Africa, probably if it goes wrong, we're going to say AI, but we're going to go, A. But AI is a huge disruptor, as that's the term we use these days. It's going to disrupt many things, the way in which you move goods, the way in which you employ people, the way in which goods are paid for, or warehouses and stock levels are managed. The RFA, one of the best things that happened to the RFA in terms of digital transformation was COVID. The RFA actually went onto an electronic basis just before COVID happened, and we've never looked back. It gave us the opportunity, gave the board the opportunity to relook at many things that they did and to change those things. In terms of going forward, what are the things that we're going to look at? Well, there you see those points, and we all know what's happening with supply chain in terms of the international sector. We know how things are changing. There are some challenges you're going to hear about today, BBBEE, the charter there too, employment equity, driver, as you hear from some of the departments, fatigue. Another one of those but definitely the big disruptors, e-commerce, and that other horrible acronym that nobody ever seems to get right, known as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or area, that is going to change how many of you do business. If we do go into what is envisaged as an EU, you'll see many of your businesses changing. We've played a big part in terms of crossing borders. You'll hear a little bit about the NLCC, rail. The RFA, much to the surprise of many people, has used a slogan that rail must carry its fair share. And I don't think we can sit here today saying, well, I make a joke of it now and then at the Department of Transport, which really gets them rattled when I say to them, well, we're carrying 88%, we may as well take the other 12%. You know, we can sort out all of this nonsense. Give us the 100 billion and we'll do fine. But rail needs to play its part, needs to carry its share, and the RFA is keenly involved with that, and you hear some presentations in terms of that. Ultimately, the RFA today, through all of your involvement and for what's been happening for over half a century, is known as the recognized and primary representative association organization in the road freight sector. And that's a tremendous feather in your cap and kudos in your cap. So I've really truncated Penwell's speech. You'll be able to see the whole address on the site. And I'm going to quickly go through my presentation because I now have minus 25 minutes. The first thing I want to say, humbly, is thank you to all the sponsors. We are tremendously blessed to have such belief in not only this event, but in the things we do. You can see the number of sponsors that are there that have come literally to the party and have been with us for many years. And some sponsors have pledged 2 and 3 and 5-year deals with us that we are tremendously thankful for, because it allows us to do a lot of other things. So the surplus we make at this conference, we use to run other programs, road safety programs, education programs. You saw a very quick slide about SMME support programs. So there are a lot of things that we do from your kind attendance here and paying off both your membership fees and your conference fees. So once again, I cannot raise this more than saying a tremendous thank you. And I think we should all give our sponsors a huge round of applause. I have now traditionally done this because I have both Bongani, who challenges me, and Ongama, and we all bring our crystal balls to this table. I think mine is far more cracked and cloudy than theirs is, and we'll quickly take a run through this. What happened in 2023? Your association grew by another 12%. Once again, we are absolutely blessed to be in that sort of a scenario, while other associations seem to be struggling with membership. We've had 5 big challenges. They're not elephants, lions, and buffaloes. We hide those under the settee. We've had, 4 big challenges in 2023, 24. And some of those are still with us today, and you will see a fair amount of noise happened last week around the Department of Transport, giving Transnet a 51 billion odd guarantee. So hopefully some of those are going to be resolved. Crime, as you'll all know, is still a huge issue. And then pressure on rates is really, really a problem. 2025, you will hear some discussions around those. And I think some of those might be, somebody said to me this morning, is there anything controversial? Well, yes, we made sure there's always something controversial. I'm not going to mention names, otherwise people like Graham might get embarrassed. But we do have Steve Hofmeyer tonight as the main artist. Wow, suddenly there's dead silence. And we've said, we don't want you to sing, we just want you to speak. So don't bring a guitar. No, I'm joking, ladies and gentlemen. It's not Steve Hofmeyer. That remains a very tight surprise. And you all know what alternative energy means and the types of costs it's bringing into your businesses. Some of the audits we do with some of our members, there are hundreds of millions of rands being pumped into alternative energy. And in terms of warehouses, they're pumping into sustainable water supply. Never mind electricity, to keep some of those things going. This is what I think is going to happen in 2026. Ongama, make notes. You'll notice there's no GNU. I think we're going to go to an eland type of government. You know, that one big one that stands up like that and runs for the hills. You can see what we're going to be dealing with. If we don't deal with the foreign driver issue in our sector, hospitality sector has got a bigger problem than we do. We're going to have a lot more unhappiness and unease, and we're going to have to deal with crime. And I'm not going to touch the BEE and the EE because there are going to be people talking about that. Lots of opportunities. South Africa and Africa is a land of opportunity or a continent of opportunity. We're extremely blessed to be living here in Africa. I think you're going to find that your customers are going to grow. So the RFA isn't just an association of South African companies. We have companies from Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, Eswatini, as it's called this week, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. We haven't yet gone to Angola. Some of us went to Angola many years ago. We're still a little bit nervous about going back there to talk to people. You're going to see a change in how distribution centers and modes work with one another. The word today is freight cities, and you would recall from last year we had Prof. Havenga here from the University of Stellenbosch talking about freight cities, and literally within a year from that discussion, they've started to germinate and grow, and you're going to see a lot of that starting to happen. We hope that the ports are really going to get to a situation where there's healthy competition and that we can get working. Because the guys who run shipping companies and the customers out there are not interested in our explanations and excuses. A couple of years ago, when I first joined the RFA, we used to laugh at the port of Dar, as they call it then. That port Dar, called Dar es Salaam, it took 21 days to get a container, a box, from quayside to the gate at Dar es Salaam. Some of you might have worked there and you can recall that. They're down to 7 days. Do you know what the average mean time to get a box out of Durban is? It's 8 days. We're going in the wrong direction here. Walvis Bay guarantees to get your box out of the port within 48 hours, maybe into a depot outside of the gate. But those are the challenges. We have to better that. We have to better that. We can't equal that. So that's really going to be a challenge for us as South Africa if we want to remain as the gateway to Africa. And we should be the gateway to Africa. And if AfCFTA, or the African Continental Free Trade Area, the agreement comes into play, you can ground your box at any port, like you would do in the EU, on Africa, and it could then travel to its final destination. So you could find, if the shipping companies find that the Walvis Bays and the Lobitus and the Beiras and whatever they are far more efficient than the Cape Towns and the Durbans and the 2 clicks and a burger, sorry, Gaberge, and all of those, that we're going to lose that trade. And it's really, really important that those who make the decisions in government understand that. And then sustainable margins. RFA doesn't talk about rates, but you'll know who we compete with. And there are lots of the so-called load brokers out there that are creating issues that we need the department to look at in terms of how they operate and their operations. Plenty of data you can get from us. It's actually amazing how over the last couple of years we've suddenly found a number of departments coming to us to get data. We didn't know that the VCI, the Vehicle Cost Index, was used by the Department of, then called Mineral Resources and Energy, then it became Energy and no mineral resources, then it became no resources and no energy, whatever it became, that they used our data to factor in the pricing of fuel sold at a pump. And then, of course, they went and chose on that schedule the cheapest truck, not the truck that actually transported the fuel. So the tanker that had a totally different cost structure to it in terms of its equipment and operating. We have an Ollie. We haven't quite worked out what we should call it, because in the beginning it was an Ollie Schmidt. An Ollie, so the monthly operational index, incident index, tells you what happens, and I'll show you a slide of that very quickly. The incidents that happen per day as reported to us by our members and by some of the groups that we are on, and I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we don't get all of the reports. And then, of course, there's a fair amount of development that's going to happen. If you can see that slide, and this presentation will be available to you, that's per day. Per day, reported. And you'll see that crime, she's winning all the way. Winning all the way. And crime has become clever. About 5 years ago, it was hijacking. We had a couple of good anti-hijacking teams from the SAPS, and we began to hit the guys on the road, and we closed a couple in Gauteng. They now go to the DCTs. Why hit one truck at a time? Why can't you go to where the source of the goods are? Actually, very, very interesting. And I always get asked, what's the number one commodity that's hit? And the answer to that is, where's the demand and what is the demand? And it can be seasonal. So if the demand is for food like mealie meal, some of you don't know, mealie meal is on top of the list. And the reason being, the truck doesn't carry 40 tons of mealie meal. The truck actually carries pre-packed mealie meal. It's very easy to get rid of it. One of the things that you saw happening in Gauteng, it's not the only reason why SAPS and the government was going into the spaza shops, was because many of those, not all of them, many of those were the fronts for those sorts of operations. What follows mealie meal? Cooking oil. How do you cook your mealie meal? And a vast majority of that goes into Africa, where the demand is. For those of you who've crossed at Beitbridge, Afrikaans call it Beitbrug. Those of you who've crossed at Beitbridge, look at the price of mealie meal at the shop just before the border, where most of the Zimbabweans who can come across to buy the mealie meal and go back, and look at the price of that same packet of mealie meal at your local shop. That tells you where a lot of this mealie meal goes, not just to Beitbrug, but north. So that's what your association is. We've always said we're a membership-based association. We are only as good as you are in giving us information, telling us what's happening, and supporting us. And we thank you very much for that. I think these days it's very easy to stay connected. We've got a whole lot of members who can help you with various things, and I'm not going to mention their names because they obviously are all competitors. But go to the RFA website. You can see who the members are. The contact details are there. If you don't have your contact details and logo on the membership directory, get it there. There are many members who have had tremendous leads just by using that on the website. We run interest groups, and we're going to start a new interest group shortly for the refrigerated trucking sector, subsector, community. We're very proud about that. And it's important to use those interest groups that run 24/7, 365 to get support. We have members who can support you. This is not collusion. You can ask questions, simple questions. How many pieces of chicken does a normal find? No. What border operates 24 hours? If I want to go ABC, can I take my abnormal route down that way? What is the type of thing that I require for dangerous goods? In the old days, you would phone someone at the RFA like Gavin Kelly, and he would then have to go and find a member who operated in that space, ask that question, then come back to you. Now, depending on the type of interest group you're in, you can get that answer back literally within minutes. Utilize the data and support of the association. This is not collusion. This is about ensuring your business stays sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, I've actually won back a couple of minutes. I spoke very quickly. All of this information will be on the website, so you can get it there. And obviously, you can interact with us and ask us questions down the line. Bongani, Yabonga Kakhulu bam.